I'm Claire. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how my own family tried to ruin me, but I turned the tables. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of my mother's fork clinking against her wine glass. Every eye at the dining table was locked on me, waiting for me to crack. My sister leaned back in her chair with that smug little smile she always wore when she thought she had me cornered. My father sat with his arms folded, pretending he was just an innocent bystander, when really, he was in on it from the start. They had no idea that I wasn't scared anymore. Not this time. Because the evidence I had carefully collected was sitting in my bag, ready to blow everything apart. I wasn't just fighting back tonight, I was going to win. 2 months earlier, none of this seemed possible. Back then, I still thought family meant loyalty. I thought we had disagreements, sure, but that deep down we wanted the best for each other. I had no idea just how far my own blood would go to strip me of everything I worked for. And I definitely didn't know I would have to learn the hard way that sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who tried to destroy you. It started small, as these things usually do. A phone call from my sister one Thursday evening. Her voice was sweet, almost rehearsed, as she told me how lucky I was. She said I didn't realize how much I had compared to everyone else, that my life had been handed to me, which was ironic because everything I owned I had clawed out of late nights and endless work. Still, she had a way of making her manipulation sound like concern. "We just think you should share a little more, Claire," she said. "Family comes first, right?" I remember gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white, because something in her tone told me this wasn't a request. The first real red flag came at a Sunday lunch. My mother, who had always played the peacemaker, suddenly spoke like she had been practicing lines. She told me how hard things have been for my sister and her husband, how the house they wanted was just out of reach, and how a small favor from me could fix everything. I sat there in stunned silence as they all stared at me like it was already decided. The favor, of course, was me co-signing their mortgage. Now, maybe to some people that doesn't sound like the end of the world, but for me, it was my line in the sand. I had worked my entire adult life to get my finances stable. I had no debt, I had finally bought a small flat of my own, and my credit score was my golden ticket. If I signed that paper for them, I would be chained to their choices forever. And if they failed, it would all come crashing down on me. I said no. Calm, clear, polite. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The very next week, my father called me. He rarely called unless he wanted something, and this time he went straight for the jugular. He told me I was selfish, that family isn't about contracts and credit scores. He said if the roles were reversed, my sister would help me without question. I almost laughed at the absurdity of that. My sister wouldn't loan me a cup of sugar without asking for interest. Still, my father's words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. He had always been hard on me, but hearing him side with them so strongly planted a seed of doubt. Was I really being unfair? I brushed it off, or at least I tried to. But little things started happening that made it impossible to ignore. My aunt called out of the blue to ask why I was being so cold-hearted. A cousin texted me saying my sister was so stressed and I should lighten her load. It was like a campaign had been launched, and I was the villain in their story. My family was whispering about me, twisting the narrative, and painting me as the one who betrayed them. That was when I realized this wasn't just about a mortgage. This was about control. One night, I sat in my flat, staring at my laptop, scrolling through old bank statements, contracts, even emails from work. Something inside me clicked. If they wanted to play dirty, I wasn't going to fight with emotions. I was going to fight with proof. That was the moment I went from feeling powerless to plotting. Of course, I didn't show my hand. When my sister dropped by unannounced, just to talk, I let her sit in my kitchen and ramble on about how much pressure she was under. I nodded, I smiled, I even made her tea. But I watched carefully, noting every little slip in her story. First, she said the bank rejected them because of her husband's temporary contract. Later, she claimed it was because of bad luck with paperwork. I didn't call her out. I just kept those details filed away because I knew the lies would stack up until they collapsed under their own weight. Still, the pressure was suffocating. Every dinner, every phone call, every family gathering was another round of guilt trips and accusations. My father would shake his head at me like I was a disappointment. My mother would sigh dramatically, muttering about how some people forget where they come from. My sister, she just kept smiling that same smug smile, certain I would cave eventually. But here's the thing. I wasn't about to cave. Not this time. Because what they didn't know was that while they were busy scheming against me, I was already gathering the kind of receipts no one could argue with. And I knew, deep down, that the day would come when I'd lay it all out in front of them and watch their little plan go up in flames. The tension only grew sharper after that. My sister began to escalate her tactics, as though testing how much pressure I could withstand before snapping. She started sending me texts at odd hours, messages dripping with passive aggression. Must be nice to have money while others struggle. Or, I hope you're sleeping well knowing your niece might not have a home. She always ended them with a smiley face, like that somehow softened the venom. At first, I tried ignoring her, but silence only gave her room to spread rumors. I began hearing whispers from extended relatives that I was too proud, ungrateful, even cruel. The narrative had shifted so completely that I was no longer the daughter who worked hard and built her own life. I was suddenly the villain who abandoned her family. That's when I understood her strategy. If she couldn't bully me into compliance directly, she would isolate me socially, turning everyone against me until I had no one left to stand by my side. The second escalation came in the form of an intervention. My parents invited me to what I thought was a normal Sunday lunch. Instead, I walked into the dining room to find not just my parents and sister, but also 2 aunts, an uncle, and even my grandmother. Plates of food sat untouched in front of them, as though the meal was just a cover for the ambush. My mother opened with a speech about unity and sacrifice. My father followed with his usual line about how family obligations aren't optional. Then, one by one, the others chimed in, each rehearsed line hitting me like stones. I sat there in silence, staring at their expectant faces, the clink of cutlery filling the gaps between accusations. My sister finally leaned forward, voice soft, eyes fake wet with tears. "Claire, if you don't help us, we'll lose everything." And then she said the line that made my blood run cold. "And when we lose everything, it'll be because of you." That was the moment I realized they weren't just asking anymore. They were threatening. It wasn't said outright, but the implication was crystal clear. If I didn't do what they wanted, they would pin the family's downfall on me, and I would forever wear the label of traitor. I remember gripping my fork so tightly I thought it might bend. My heart raced, my face burned, but I forced myself to keep calm. "I'm not co-signing anything," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. The room went still, then erupted into chaos. My aunt called me heartless, my uncle muttered about how I always thought I was better than everyone. My grandmother shook her head, mumbling something about forgetting your roots, and my sister, she leaned back, crossed her arms, and smirked. She had expected me to resist. She was just setting the stage for her final move. That final move came a week later, and it was worse than anything I imagined. I received a letter from a bank I didn't even use, confirming my application to co-sign a mortgage. My hands shook as I read it, my stomach twisted into knots. Someone, no, not someone, my sister and her husband had forged my information. They had taken my personal details and submitted them without my consent. I couldn't breathe. I paced my flat, the letter crumpling in my hand. This was beyond manipulation. This was fraud. I called the bank immediately, my voice trembling as I explained I never signed anything, never applied, never gave permission. The representative on the phone sounded sympathetic, but his words chilled me. "We'll need to investigate further, but your name is already in the system." I hung up the phone shaking, half in disbelief, half in rage. They hadn't just pushed, they had crossed into criminal territory. And worse, they had done it under the assumption that I would be too scared, too passive, too loyal to fight back. They thought I'd fold rather than risk a family war. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook open, pen scratching furiously across the page. I wasn't just jotting down thoughts, I was building a case. Every text, every phone call, every forged document. I was creating a paper trail, one that would show beyond doubt who the real villains were. I even tried, one last time, to end things peacefully. I called my sister, hoping maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to stop this before it blew up. I told her what I received from the bank, that this was serious, that she could get in real trouble if she didn't withdraw the application immediately. Her response? She laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Claire," she said. "It's just paperwork. Stop acting like you're better than us. You'll thank me later when you realize family always comes first." That laugh sealed it. Any last shred of guilt I carried vanished in that moment. She didn't care about me. She didn't care about the law. She cared about control, about using me as her safety net, no matter the cost. And I knew then, if she wanted a war, I was going to give her one. But I wasn't going to fight with rage. I was going to fight with precision, with documentation, with law on my side. Because while she was playing games, I was preparing checkmate. The first thing I did was protect myself. I called each credit bureau and put a fraud alert on my file. I asked the bank for a case number and wrote it in bold at the top of a fresh notebook page. Then I walked to my bedroom mirror, looked myself in the eye, and said out loud, "You're not the victim in this story." It sounds silly, but I needed to hear my own voice tell me the truth. I wasn't running anymore. I was building a record. The bank's fraud unit was careful but clear. They confirmed the application had come through a broker, not directly, and that my signature looked like a scan dropped onto a form. They couldn't tell me everything yet, but the investigators suggested two things: get everything in writing and send a data request for copies of what they held about me. So I did. I emailed the bank the same day, used the reference number, and asked for the application packet, the timestamps, and any contact email used. I also asked them to freeze the application and notify any broker that my identity was disputed. The reply was measured and professional, but there was one line that made my pulse slow down. "We have paused the application pending investigation." Next, I found a solicitor who specialized in consumer fraud and identity misuse. She was calm, direct, and 10 steps ahead of me in every way. She told me to stop answering calls and insist on email only. She told me to keep original safe, back up screenshots to a cloud folder, and write a simple timeline with dates and short sentences. "Paper beats pressure," she said, "and you already have more paper than they think." She also suggested I record my own voicemails and keep them. That is legal where we live for personal records. I left her office with a plan and a folder of template letters that felt like armor. That night, I poured everything onto the page. The Sunday lunch, the intervention, my father's words, my sister's laugh, the forged application. I printed texts and highlighted the parts where she guilted me. I printed the bank letter and circled the case number. I wrote the timeline in black ink, neat and simple. Date, what happened, what I did next. When I finished, I had 21 pages. For the first time in weeks, I slept without waking in a panic. 2 days later, the bank sent a secure link to view the supporting documents. My hands shook as I typed in the code. There it was, a scanned copy of my signature pasted onto a broker form, and a fuzzy image of my passport bio page that I had never given them. The file name of the passport image stopped me. Claire_ID_JM.jpg. JM were my brother-in-law's initials. The hair on my arms stood up. I took a screenshot of the file name, added it to my folder, and exhaled slowly. I didn't need a dramatic reveal yet. I just needed to keep collecting. You'll thank me later when you realize family always comes first. The broker's cover email had also been included. It said, "Client has authorized sister to co-sign, docs attached," and it was sent from a generic address that matched the broker's firm but had a handwritten signature block with a mobile number. I dialed it. A tired voice answered. I said my name and the case number, and the tone on the other end changed in an instant. He apologized and said he'd been told by the couple that I just needed a quick approval and didn't like emails. "They said you were busy," he added, almost embarrassed. I asked him, kindly, to forward me everything they had sent him, including any files that showed who uploaded what. He hesitated. Then he said, "If you send a formal request, I'll comply." I emailed him the solicitor's template within 5 minutes. I kept my life small and clean while I waited. I went to work, I made tea, I walked in the park with my headphones in. I didn't respond to any family messages. I told my manager at work, in case the fallout touched my job, and HR quietly noted my concern in case it ever became a harassment issue. At night, I read, not thrillers or romance, policies, complaint procedures, how to serve a cease and desist correctly, how to hand-deliver a letter and get proof of delivery without a scene. It sounds cold, but it helped me breathe. The more I learned, the less I feared. The broker came through first. He sent a zipped folder to my solicitor and copied me. Inside were PDFs of the forms, the email thread with my sister's husband, and upload logs. The logs showed the documents had been uploaded from the same IP address twice, 3 minutes apart, and both uploads were tagged with the username Jake. There was also a short note from the broker. Spoke with applicant's sister. She confirmed urgency. My solicitor underlined that line and wrote in the margin, "They used your name to claim authority." It wasn't just wrong, it was sloppy. I went back in my memory, trying to figure out how they even had my ID. Then it hit me. Months earlier, my sister had asked to borrow my passport to double-check a holiday booking spelling. I refused to hand it over but agreed to read out the details. She had sat there, phone in hand, and said, "Let me snap it to be safe." I said no and kept the passport in my lap. Afterward, she hugged me and thanked me, and I remember her phone screen lighting up on the table, camera open. I thought nothing of it. Now, that moment snapped into focus. Maybe she had taken an old photo another time, or maybe they had found a scan from years ago. Either way, they had captured enough to try to be me. With the evidence building, my solicitor drafted 2 letters. The first was a cease and desist addressed to my sister and her husband, instructing them to withdraw any applications made in my name, stop contacting me except by email, and preserve all relevant documents, phones, and accounts for potential legal proceedings. The second letter went to my parents, not as a legal threat, but as a formal notice. I would not attend any meeting where I was pressured, recorded without my consent, or ambushed. Any family discussion must include a neutral witness. "Boundaries are not punishment," my solicitor said softly, sliding the envelopes across her desk. "They are seatbelts." I hand-delivered the letters with a process server, so there was no argument about who received what. My sister called me 5 times that evening from 2 different numbers. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, voice sugar-sweet and sharp as glass. "You think you're clever? You think this will save you?" She paused long enough for me to hear her husband whisper something in the background. "You'll break first, Claire. You always do." I saved the voicemail and backed it up in 3 places. At work, I asked a friendly colleague in compliance to explain how Source of Truth works with documents. She told me that even if a signature looks real, systems record who submitted what and when. If they uploaded it, the trail is there, she said. People think screens hide them. They don't. I went back to my folder and stuck a bright tab on the upload log page. It felt like the kind of page you flip to in a courtroom. Not that I wanted court. I wanted clean, quiet accountability. I wanted them to see what they had done and stop. A week later, the bank investigator called with an update I didn't expect. They had withdrawn the application and flagged the broker account. They could not share IP addresses with me, but they would issue a formal letter stating that the application was not initiated by the named party and appears to involve unauthorized use of identification. I asked if they would repeat that sentence, if needed, in a meeting with my family. He said he couldn't attend a family event, but he could be available to read the letter aloud to me on speaker if I needed it. I thanked him. I hung up. Then I laughed for the first time in weeks. Not a big laugh, just a quiet one, like a door opening. My mother tried again to schedule another family talk. I said yes, on my terms. It would be at their house where I knew the room layout. It would be at 7 p.m. with the neighbor we all trusted present as a witness. I would bring my work friend, which was true because I asked a colleague who did mediation training to come and sit quietly. I would bring my folder and keep it closed until I needed it. And at exactly 7:30 p.m., I would call the bank's investigator and put him on speaker for a 30-second reading of one paragraph. No shouting, no insults, no surprises. The only dramatic thing in the room would be the truth. I also prepared for the worst. I set up a simple checklist in my notebook. If they shout, pause. If they lie, ask them to repeat slowly. If they deny, show one thing, only one. If they push, leave. "You were not there to win an argument," my solicitor said when I ran the plan by her. "You were there to set a record in front of witnesses. Keep your calm. Let paper do the work." The day of the meeting, I dressed like I was going to a quiet office. Navy jumper, clean hair, flat shoes. I packed my folder with tabs: bank, broker, timeline, texts, voicemails. I added a thin plastic sleeve at the back with 2 letters sealed inside. One addressed to the broker confirming the withdrawal, and one addressed to my parents explaining why I would be going no contact if the harassment continued. The sleeve felt like an escape hatch. I hoped I wouldn't need it, but I had it. I arrived 10 minutes early and stood on the pavement, breathing the cool air and counting my heartbeats. My sister and her husband pulled up right on time, looking polished and bright, like they were about to give a toast at a wedding. She smiled at me as she passed. "Let's be kind tonight," she said softly, and I heard the threat tucked inside the sweetness. I didn't rise to it. I just nodded and stepped inside. The living room looked staged, as if my mother had moved furniture for the performance. Chairs were angled toward the center, a coffee table cleared for the papers, and a tray of untouched tea sat like a prop. Our neighbor sat on the far armchair, hands folded, eyes kind. My colleague gave me a small nod. My father stood by the mantel, arms crossed, jaw set. My mother smoothed a cushion and smiled too hard. My sister took a seat near the middle. Her husband sat slightly behind her, the way people do when they want to speak without being seen. I placed my folder on my lap and kept my hands on top of it. I felt calm in a way that didn't feel like me. It felt like the version of me I had wanted to be the night of that first lunch. The room settled, the clock ticked, the stage was set. And none of them knew that the most important voice in the room would arrive at 7:30. "Before we start," I said, "I want us to agree on something simple." I looked at each face, one by one. "We will speak in turns. We will not shout, and everything said tonight is witnessed." My sister smirked, but she said nothing. My father rolled his shoulders like he was warming up for a fight. My mother nodded, eager to keep the illusion of harmony. The neighbor cleared his throat and said, That sounds fair. Silence is not consent, it's strategy. My sister leaned forward first, voice soft, elbows on her knees. Claire, you've been so distant. We've all been so worried about you. We just want to fix this. We want a solution. Her husband nodded, his hand on her back like it was a stage cue. We can do this without bringing in strangers. Families should keep things private. He didn't know that privacy had been the cloak for their plan. He didn't know that sunlight was my plan. I let them talk for 2 full minutes. I didn't interrupt. Then I opened my folder to the first tab and slid one sheet onto the table. It was the bank's formal letter, printed in black and white, the case number in the corner. At 7:30, I'm going to call the bank and they will read one paragraph from this letter. After that, I will ask one question. I didn't say what the question was. I let the space between us do that part for me. Why are you making this so dramatic? This is simple. You sign, they pay, everyone is happy. He said it like happiness could be printed and notarized. I kept my eyes on him and smiled, small and steady. I'm not signing anything, and we're about to hear why. Paper doesn't flinch. People do. The clock ticked to 7:30. I took out my phone, put it on the table, and pressed the speaker icon. The call connected on the second ring. The investigator's voice filled the room, calm and even. Good evening, miss. I can read the passage now. I looked at my sister, then at my parents, and said, please do. And that was where the ground began to shift. The investigator's voice came through steady and professional, the kind of tone that makes people lean in without realizing. This is to confirm that the mortgage application listing Claire as co-signer was not initiated by her. Our review indicates unauthorized use of her identification, and the application has been permanently withdrawn. The words hung in the air like smoke. My mother's hands froze on her lap, fingers curling around the hem of her skirt. My father's mouth opened and shut, no sound coming out. My sister shifted in her chair, but her husband's hand pressed down on her arm, as if reminding her to stay still. My neighbor raised his eyebrows slightly, and my colleague, calm, neutral, simply jotted something down on a notepad. Thank you, I said into the phone. That's all we needed. The investigator signed off politely, and the room was silent except for the click of me ending the call. I let the silence stretch. It's funny how silence can feel louder than shouting. Finally, I slid another page across the table. This one was the broker's email thread, the one that showed uploads from Jake.m. So, I said, my voice calm but sharp, does anyone want to explain why my brother-in-law's initials are on the upload logs? My sister inhaled quickly, eyes darted to him. He cleared his throat, sat up straighter, and tried to muster confidence. That's a mistake. Probably just a system glitch. You know how computers are. I tilted my head and smiled. Not kindly. A glitch that writes your username into an audit log? Interesting. Maybe the police will think it's interesting too. My sister's face flushed bright red, and her smug smile finally cracked. She tried to laugh it off. Claire, come on, you're taking this way too far. We're family. Nobody's calling the police. Then stop acting like criminals, I said. You don't get to betray me and call it family. My father finally spoke, his voice low and rough. Claire, enough of this. You're embarrassing us. His eyes burned into me, but I didn't flinch. No, Dad, I said, leaning forward. They embarrassed themselves when they forged my name. I'm just holding up the mirror. My mother whispered my name, her voice trembling, but I didn't look at her. My eyes stayed on my sister. She shifted uncomfortably, tapping her nails against the table. Fine, she spat. We tried, so what? You could have just helped us, and none of this would have been necessary. Necessary. That word lit a fire in me. You think fraud was necessary? I said, my voice rising for the first time. You think dragging my name through the mud, lying to the bank, risking my entire future, that was necessary? His husband tried to jump in, his tone dismissive. It's not like anything actually happened. The loan didn't go through, so what's the big deal? I slid the final sheet onto the table, the cease and desist letter with their names in bold. "The big deal," I said, my voice razor sharp, "is that you broke the law. This is a cease and desist. You're done contacting me outside of email, you're done using my name, and you're done pretending this was anything but fraud." My sister's eyes widened as she read her own name on the letter. Her husband leaned forward, trying to grab it, but my colleague calmly placed a hand on the paper to stop him. "It's theirs," she said simply, her voice firm. The air was thick, the kind of heavy stillness before a storm breaks. My father muttered under his breath, my mother wrung her hands, and my sister hissed, "You'll regret this." I stood up, folder under my arm, my voice steady as steel. "No, I'll sleep just fine tonight, for the first time in weeks." The meeting ended not with shouting, but with silence. They didn't follow me to the door. They didn't call after me. My neighbor walked me out, his voice low. "You did the right thing," he said, "and they know it." The fallout was swift. The next day, my solicitor received a panicked email from my sister's husband, begging to talk privately before anything got reported. He wanted to explain, to smooth it over, to convince me it was all a misunderstanding. But there were no misunderstandings left. There was only a record. And records don't lie. Within a week, I heard from an aunt that my sister was telling everyone I had overreacted, that I had brought outsiders into family business. But her voice didn't carry the same weight anymore. People had seen the shift in her performance. Whispers started traveling the other way now, about her lies, her desperation, her husband's shady behavior. The control she thought she had was crumbling. But I wasn't finished yet, because justice isn't just about exposing lies, it's about consequences. And I had one final step to take, one that would make sure they could never pull this on me again. Control isn't taken back with words, it's taken back with action. I didn't report them to the police that night, though part of me wanted to. I could have. The evidence was all there. But my solicitor had advised me to think bigger, not just about punishment, but about protection. So instead, I filed an official fraud report with the bank and credit bureaus, locking down my information for the next 7 years. I also added my name to a protective registry that required in-person verification for any new financial applications. It meant extra hassle for me, but it meant my sister and her husband had lost the easiest way to ever use me again. The solicitor also sent them a final warning letter, referencing potential civil action. It wasn't a bluff. We had enough proof to drag them into court for damages, but sometimes the shadow of a courtroom is scarier than the courtroom itself. The letter stated clearly, "Cease all defamatory statements, preserve all devices and accounts, and withdraw any attempt to use Ms. Claire's identity. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal escalation." It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was cold and final, like a judge's gavel before it even fell. My sister responded with silence for once. No texts, no calls, no fake tears. Her husband sent one last email, a pathetic attempt to spin things. He claimed they had been desperate, that they thought it would all work out, and that I was cruel for airing family matters in front of outsiders. I read it once, archived it, and never replied. Because the truth was simple. They weren't sorry. They were only sorry they got taught. And yet, even as the legal threat hung over them, the social consequences were already doing the work. My grandmother stopped speaking to me for a while, furious that I had shamed the family. But my cousin, the one who had once texted me guilt trips, called a week later with a different tone. "I didn't know they actually forged stuff," she admitted. "I thought it was just you being difficult." People started realizing the difference between gossip and evidence has gravity. It pulls the truth into the open. Meanwhile, I began to breathe again.
My flat felt like mine once more, not a hiding place. I cooked, I read, I went back to the gym. The anxiety that had lived in my chest for months began to fade. I wasn't waiting for the next guilt trip phone call anymore. I wasn't rehearsing arguments in the shower. I wasn't scanning every family gathering for traps. I was free. Weeks later, I received a letter from the bank confirming the investigation was closed, no liability on my part. Case number attached. That piece of paper was my shield. I filed it at the very front of my folder, the first page anyone would see. Proof that no matter how hard they tried to twist the story, the truth was on record. The most satisfying part wasn't even the silence from my sister. It was seeing her facade finally slip. At a distant cousin's wedding, she approached me, eyes glassy, but smile plastered on like always. She whispered, "You didn't have to ruin everything." I leaned closer, calm and steady, and said, "I didn't ruin anything. You did." Then I walked away before she could answer.
Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying the other person. Sometimes it's about refusing to let them destroy you. They wanted me tied to their debt forever. Instead, they're tied to their own shame. You don't owe loyalty to betrayal. Months later, I learned through family chatter that their mortgage still hadn't gone through. Lenders flagged them after the fraud attempt, and every new application triggered extra checks. Apparently, one bank even blacklisted them entirely. My sister's husband had to take out a high-interest personal loan just to cover basic bills, and they sold their car to make up the difference. None of that was my doing. It was the ripple effect of their own choices. But I won't lie, hearing it made me sleep a little easier. The final piece of my revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple. Boundaries. I stopped attending family gatherings that felt unsafe. I blocked numbers when I needed to. I built a small circle of relatives and friends who respected me, and I let the rest fade into the background noise. And for the first time in my life, I realized something profound. I didn't need their approval to have peace. The moral of this story isn't complicated. Boundaries aren't selfish. Protecting yourself isn't betrayal. And sometimes the best revenge is living untouched by the chaos they tried to drag you into. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just closes the door. It has been almost a year since that night in my parents' living room. I haven't spoken to my sister or her husband since, and I don't plan to. My parents still wobble between silence and guilt, sometimes sending awkward holiday cards with no mention of what happened. But I don't need apologies anymore. I've built my own peace, my own circle, and my own definition of family. I still keep the folder in my desk drawer, neat and tabbed, even though I don't look at it much now. It's a reminder, not of pain, but of strength. Every page is proof that I didn't fold, that I didn't let them take my voice or my future. Proof that when the people closest to you betray you, you can still stand. You can still fight, and you can still win. The revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about reclaiming myself. And in that, I succeeded. So if you've ever been told that family comes first, no matter what, remember this. Family isn't blood. Family is loyalty, respect, and care. And if those things aren't there, you owe them nothing. I walked away with my future intact, my credit unbroken, and my dignity untouched. That's victory enough. Sometimes the best revenge is simply freedom.